Thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm especially thrilled to be introducing Betsy Stevenson and Justin Wolfers, two of my favorite economists. I really appreciate and love their approach to economics so much. Probably a lot of the reason for that is that I am not a natural in economics. In fact, I had no interest in going into economics journalism after I graduated from journalism school. I wanted to be an arts reporter because I loved stories. I loved literature and opera and plays, and what I really loved was the stories of who we are as a culture, as a people, as humans. But I also needed to eat and pay my gas bill. So the first job I got was as a producer for the radio show Marketplace, working in the middle of the night. And I was assisting Kai Ryssdal, who was at the time the morning host. So we would work from midnight to 8 a.m. And it was my job to direct him in the studio and to write up little bits of news for his newscast. And on the first day of work, Kai asked me, a business head was going to IPO. And he asked me to write up a few hundred words about the IPO. And I remember him saying this to me, and it was like 2:00 in the morning. And I was going to Google it, but I was too tired. So I was like, Kai, what is an IPO? And he said, oh, it's an initial public offering. And I was like, oh, okay. What's an initial public offering? And he said, it's when a company goes public. And I could see he was starting to get worried. Like, who is this person who I now have to work with for the next many years? And I said, oh, going public. Got it. And then he looked at me. He's like, you don't know what that means, do you? And I said, I don't. He's like, it's when a company starts to sell stock. And I remember thinking, I am not going to be in this field for very long. And that was 15 years ago. So I ended up staying in economics, but I totally fell in love with economics at Marketplace. And the thing that I really fell in love with was that economics is stories. It's everywhere. It is in the arts. It's in everything around us. It's the way that we relate to our world. And for that reason, I have always really valued economists who can break economic concepts down in terms of stories. I find that so important. And because I sort of consider it my job. One description of my job is to translate things from concepts and maybe more academic things into something very understandable. And those stories are really an invaluable communication tool. So for example, one of the things that I have reported on for years is oil prices. The price of oil, how important oil is to the economy. I mean, that's one of sort of the big industries in the US, sort of a legendary American industry, and just a big sort of juggernaut in global business. And at Planet Money, you hear things about oil prices, but what does that mean, or the price of a barrel of oil? And we really wanted to kind of get very granular about it. So at the show, we decided to buy 100 barrels of oil. We thought we will buy 100 barrels of oil and we will kind of follow oil from the ground through the refining process, and we will try to understand this thing that the global economy really depends on, totally, for trade and for moving around and for so many things. And so we found a guy in Oklahoma who would sell us 100 barrels of oil from a little stripper well. Those are when a well is pretty much finished. It's still gives sometimes a teacup full of oil a day. But they'll sell you smaller quantities of oil. So we went to him, Jason Bruns. We bought 100 barrels of oil. We followed it through this network of pipelines, which was kind of an amazing journey that ran through Oklahoma. And we followed it to the refinery where it was refined into usable gasoline, and then all the way to a gas station, and kind of followed it through this process. And I will never think of the price of a barrel of oil the same way again, because we met all these people along the way, and you just see the substance. I mean, at one point, I touched our oil. It was coming out of a spigot, and I touched the oil, and actually we got a lot of letters about that. Apparently, you're not supposed to touch oil. That was very dangerous. I had to talk to HR. But, this stuff is real. I mean, that's the thing. I think it can be so easy to get caught up in numbers, or if you see a stock ticker going up and down, it can be easy to forget that these things are real, that oil is a thing that comes out of the ground, that people sell it and buy it, and their livelihoods depend on it, and it gets driven in a truck by someone who has a special license. And so I think, economics, like stories like this, can help connect us to things that we hear in the news that can seem very abstract. And that is one of the ways that we really try to get into economic stories, is to find a way to ground it. If you hear about trade with China, the trade war with China, we found a pig farmer who could not sell his pigs, and he didn't know what to do because pork prices were dropping. And he talked about how a lot of his fellow farmers were having to kill their animals and how awful that was for them. And then you hear stories about trade with China in a really different way. At least I do. And I think it can help our world is so big and we get so much information that's so abstract, that I think when you can bring it down to sort of a human level, it can really help people connect with it and find it interesting and understand, have a better grasp of the world that we live in and the impact that decisions that get made have on us and on our lives and on the lives of the people around us. One of the first moments where I think an economic concept really came alive for me was pretty early on in my career. The Great Recession happened of 2008. And so, the economy was really frozen. All of these complicated economic concepts were coming up. Everybody was reading things every day. The Federal Reserve was doing all kinds of unprecedented things at that time. Now they seem very precedented. But one of the concepts that came up was the concept of deflation. And deflation is just what happens when prices, so inflation is when prices go up, essentially. So deflation is when prices go down. And I remember this came alive for me because I was supposed to be reporting a story on deflation. And at the same time, I had been looking at this pair of boots online. And I didn't want to buy them because I was like, well, the economy's not doing well. The price of these is going to go down. And I kept waiting, and the price stayed the same, and I refused to buy them. And there was this moment of connection when I realized that the story I was reporting about deflation and these boots that I had been looking at was the same story. And so I actually used that in the story. I talked about the story in the top of the piece. I talked about how there was this pair of boots that I had been looking at online, and I kept putting into my little online cart and not buying. And that in a way that was an expression of my lack of faith in the economy, that I was contributing to like a potential deflationary spiral. And it's just small moments like that. And I never would have connected those two things. I didn't think that what I was doing by waiting for the boots to go on sale, which I was convinced they would, was an economic decision or had macroeconomic implications. But if you have a country full of people looking at boots online and not buying them, that can cause deflation. So I think that was a moment when I really put together in my head our personal experience in the world and these big economic concepts that we hear about. We had Justin and Betsy on for our Valentine's Day episode on The Indicator, and we were asking about various economic concepts. And one of the things that came up was the sunk cost fallacy, which this has got to be my favorite description of the sunk cost fallacy ever. I have a clip right here. I'll play it for you.
We use applications of economics that resonate with students. The classic example of the sunk cost fallacy is we all have that friend who's been in a relationship with someone for 2 or 3 years and it's not working out, and they say, but I can't bear to break up with him or her because I've been with them for so long. That's sunk cost thinking. My students all have that friend.
That makes me sad.
Yeah.
But once you've learned the sunk cost fallacy, you dump that guy or gal and go and form a great new healthy relationship. It's a beautiful story.
Well, this is where actually the opportunity cost principle comes in, because you're sitting there, you think this relationship's not working out, but I've put 2 years into it. I want to be absolutely certain that it's not going to work before I leave. But you're forgetting that every day you spend in that, you're giving up the chance to be out there trying to meet somebody new. Economics isn't about money. Money is just the measuring stick that economists tend to use. What we really care about is, what you're giving up.
So it's stories like this that are in Betsy and Justin's textbook, Principles of Economics. And I think it's stories like this that really make economics come alive, because I will never forget what the sunk cost fallacy means or opportunity costs. And what I also think this so perfectly illustrates is that economics comes up in all different areas of our lives. When we decide, if we wanted how soon to leave for the airport, when we decide if we want to spring for an expensive dinner, if we decide, as one of my friends who's an economist famously said, like if she wants to go out on her Tinder date or just stay home and watch Netflix. Economics comes into play in all of these things, including if you've been dating someone for 2 years and it's not going great. And so we begin to see that, I think the thing that it has shows me is that these stories connect us to economics, and economics connects us to each other and to the world we live in and to culture. Economics are the stories that we have about how valuable things are, how we spend our time, how we should spend our time, how things are going, if a company's doing well or not. It's all stories and it's all economics. And right now in particular, there's so much happening in our economy that is complicated and difficult and confusing. And if there's ever a time that we really needed to have a grounded understanding of what's going on in our world and a way to connect to it and relate to it and to feel connected to each other and be able to relate to each other, it's now. And I think this just really illustrates the importance of the approach that Justin and Betsy take to economics, and why I'm just particularly grateful that they are out there in the world telling their stories and helping us all understand these concepts and be able to relate to them and understand them and better navigate this world and figure out who we want to vote for and what policies we want to support, and the stories that we want to start telling about who we are and our country. So every day at the Indicator, we are looking for different ways to talk about what's happening in the world around us, different ways to explain, and different stories that we can tell that can help illustrate economics and what's going on in business and make those stories come alive. And so we hope that this is a tool that is helpful to you and hopefully inspiring to you. I certainly know how challenging it can sometimes be to make some of these things interesting and understandable, but I think it's a really important thing, very crucial. And so if we can ever be of help, I'm really glad. And I know that people like Betsy and Justin are really instrumental in helping us do that.